Hello and welcome to FPS Coach. My name is Rambo Kim, and in this video, I'm going to show you a custom task that I created to help with your wrist flicks. So let me first show you what's going on here, and it's pretty simple. I've got two circles or two targets, one's yellow and one's blue. The yellow ones line up 90 degrees. So for example, this ball here is 90 degrees here, and the next yellow is 90 degrees. And the same is also for the blue balls. So the blue is 90, 90, and 90. And the way this is set up is that there's an orb at 45 degrees from each other. So this yellow orb is exactly 180 degrees if I turn around. And this also goes for this orb. So there's an orb at 0 degrees, 45, 90, 135, and so forth. So how I want you to use this task, there's several ways to do it. The first one is you can practice your 90 degree and 45 degree flicks. So for example, I'll shoot this orb and then I'll flick 90 degrees to the right. And then if I want to practice my left side, I shoot this orb and then go to the left. So it's an easy way where you can practice both your left and right side weaknesses and also train exactly aiming 90 degrees to either side. And you can also practice your 90 degree aiming in front of you. So for example, instead of aiming to our sides, now we're aiming in front of us. So right here, it's exactly 90 degrees. And then this kind of funnel or this amount of angle that we're aiming at is very common in most FPS games, right? Most of our fights are kind of happening in front of us between these two blue orbs. Now, if you're playing like arena shooters or games where you're close range or there's action all over the place, you're definitely going to want to be able to flick from 180 degrees in front of you, right? So the action is going to be to your sides and sometimes all the way behind you. Sorry if this is making you dizzy. I just noticed that I'm flicking all over the place. But yeah, anyways, back to the point. So depending on your game of choice, you want to practice in front of you. So like games like CSGO, Valorant, tactical shooters, a lot of your fighting is going to happen within this range. And then other games like Overwatch or close range arena shooters, you're going to want to do your 180 degrees. So for example, if I shoot this orb, I'll instantly flick to the one behind me. And then if I want to practice my left side, then same thing, right? Shoot one orb and instantly turn around and shoot the one behind me. And how you want to practice this mechanically is there's two ways to basically aim. One is if you're aiming as like a pivot aimer. So if you look on the webcam on my mouse, a pivot aimer is someone that doesn't like to shift their arm around. What they do is they'll either keep their wrist or their forearm at the edge of the table anchored. So if I'm flicking here from these blue orbs, my wrist and my forearm aren't really moving, right? They're not shifting. So what I mean by shifting is that they're actually moving positions or they're leaving their anchor. So there's a lot of players that like to pivot like this, which is me personally. So if I can, I like to kind of aim here. This is kind of my comfort zone. And of course, if I need to do like 180 degrees, I do need to shift my wrist and forearm to create that space because that anchor position doesn't provide enough sensitivity where I can reach that angle that I'm aiming for, right? So you can practice with your wrist and your forearm anchored like this and get really, really good at that position. And then once you need to start aiming behind you, you do need to do some shifting. So if you're a shifter, you can practice it by shifting your whole wrist and forearm. So for example, people like to shift their arm, right? So when I'm flicking, my forearm and my wrist are moving from a different position on the pad, whereas a anchor player, it keeps everything kind of stable and locked in place. Another way you can use this task is to practice what I call wrist resetting, or being able to lift off your wrist and then create more space. So what I mean by that is if you're like one of those players that keep things anchored, well, you're going to run out of mousepad space when you reach the side, when you reach your maximum wrist bend. So for example, if I shoot this yellow orb, and then if I bend my wrist to the maximum to the right, this is the furthest that my sensitivity will allow my wrist bend to go. So if I need to aim past this, what anchor players should be able to do is lift their mouse off the pad and then reset their wrist back to at least neutral point, back to the left, so now they can create more space. So a good way to practice this lift off and resetting ability is practice in 90 degrees or 45 degrees. So for example, if I shoot this yellow orb, I'll bend my wrist to the right, and I'm stretching here, so my sensitivity, this is pretty much my max wrist bend. I'll shoot this orb, lift my mouse, replant it in the neutral point, and then bend my wrist to the right again. So it's like a cycle. So let me do this in slow-mo. So my wrist is in neutral position. I shoot the orb, bend my wrist, shoot, lift off, recenter, shoot, bend. So it's a cycle of bending my wrist, shooting, resetting the wrist, creating more space, shooting again. And this way, it allows me to keep my wrist and my forearm anchored on the mouse pad at all times. So being able to lift off and reset and shoot, you're able to aim past what your wrist bend allows you to do. So it's a technique, right? Now, some things to watch out for is not to try to shoot these orbs too fast, where it's forcing you to be sloppy and sacrificing your mechanic. So what I mean by that is if I'm trying to shoot orbs as fast as I can, I'm so ingrained shooting it the right way. So if I'm like shooting this orb and then I'm moving my arm and it's like kind of all over the place, well, all that shifting and moving around the mouse pad is going to catch up to me, because eventually I'll get to a point where I get lost and I'm just stretching beyond what's capable of my anatomy or kind of my comfort zone. So you want to try to stay within the area that you're most comfortable with and that you're used to aiming within this area, right? So most players are really good at aiming like, in the center of their mouse pad, but if they start to get their arm and wrist and like all over to the side of the mouse pad, usually you're not as comfortable aiming in that area. So yeah, just to recap, practice your 45-degree flicks in front of you like this. And depending on your sensitivity, you should be able to do this no problem. Now, if you have super low sense and you have problem reaching towards these blue orbs, your sensitivity is probably too low, I would say, in most cases. Or you're going to have to use more of your arm and more of the mouse pad space to aim at these orbs. So that's just kind of a good checkpoint. I would like for your wristband to at least reach these orbs right here. And now if you're going to do 180 degrees, now this is going to force a little bit more of your arm into play and also kind of force you to do more of your wristband. So once you get really good at 45 degrees here in front of you, then you could do 90 degrees to the left and right like this. And then you could go to 180s and make sure you practice both sides. You can also practice continuously aiming towards one side. So 90 degrees, lift off, what we talked about earlier. So shoot, lift off, and make sure you practice this both ways. And what this is going to do is really expose your weaknesses, either to the left side or the right side, how you're able to keep anchored on the mouse pad and use your wristband or your arm to shift around to aim towards both sides. So hopefully this video is helpful. I know there's a lot of techniques and little drills to practice, but I wanted to fit this all into one task in one video so you can try all these for yourselves. If you want to find this task, you can open up AimLab, and inside the workshop, search for FPS Coach Circle Wrist Flick Training. I'll pop up the text here that you can search in the workshop, and also in the description below, I'll give you a link to where you can go directly into the workshop task. If you found this task helpful and you're interested in finding more of these type of tasks, you can go to playerbase.com, and if you look for a coach and then find me under there, Ron Rambo Kim, I've got a subscription plan for $10 a month where you have access to a private Discord channel and also to a playlist of a whole bunch of different tasks that I've created to train specific skills like flicking, tracking, movement, peeking, defending, reaction speed, sniping, and more. So hopefully I'll be able to see you here and join us in the private Discord channel where I can help you out with any of your questions and answers. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful in some way, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date.